Hi, Zelda. Thanks for joining me today, friend.
Hey Tasshin, I'm so happy to be here.
So, I have followed you on Twitter for I think a year and a half or 2 years and just been curious about what you were up to. And then you started kind of collaborating with 1517, and we had the chance to meet up this summer in Toronto when we were both there. And I was really happy to meet you in person briefly. And then you just launched this new program, Nautilus, and I'm really curious to hear about that. So, there's a lot we can talk about. But I'll start by asking you the question I ask everyone, which is about their life story. And for me, I don't know. I love to read novels, and these days I write novels, and I really like this view that it's just a view. It's like just a way of seeing things, but that we're like the main character in our own lives in this really grand unfolding story. And from that perspective, to me, everyone's life is just this incredible story. It's not like there's a good novel or a bad novel or something like that. It's like, oh, these are all so interesting. And so I love to hear from people how they conceive of what their life has been like and how they make sense of who they are and what their role is in the world. And everyone's way of relating to that is really different. And I learned so much. And often the specific things that I'm interested in kind of make more sense to me framed in the larger context of, oh, you grew up here and then this happened to you and you were interested in this from an early age. And so I love to hear about that. And it kind of helps me to understand someone and their world better, even though it's a really big question. I know it's a big question. So, with all that, I'd love to hear from you about your life so far and what's happened to you and how you make sense of it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I was born on the Mediterranean Sea. I in a country called France. I don't really like to say that I'm from France because people's idea of France is kind of Parisian posh culture. And I did not grow up in an environment like that at all. I grew up in a city, a port, on the yeah, on in the south of France, in a city that's both very beautiful with a lot of nature, beautiful landscapes, as well as a lot of roughness. And I think that kind of this paradox between a rough, like poor and kind of violent at times environment and this beautiful nature, the sea, the forest, these two environments combined have been super influential in my life. I spend a lot of time in nature. I spent a lot of time in the streets with my friends when I was very young, from 11 or 12 years old. I was all by myself, kind of running my life the way I wanted to, with a lot of responsibilities, not necessarily the most, balanced, I guess, childhood. I um, kind of raised myself up to adulthood at a very young age. And yeah, and that allowed me to um, go after lots of adventures and lots of problems that made me feel very passionate. And when it comes to my story, my life story, love what you said when you kind of put this question together. I would say my life story truly starts when I'm 14 years old and I am very unhappy at school. And an incident happens in the classroom with one of my teachers and one of my peers. And that makes me so angry. And I think for the first time in my life, I feel this sense of injustice so strong. And that kind of pushes me, I guess, to go beyond that, environment in which I was brought up. Go beyond what my friends do with their time. Go beyond what I was told I was able or not able to do. And I decided to write an article online about my experience as a high schooler in the French education system. And the main goal of this article was to denounce this incident. But while I was writing it, I kind of realized, oh, I have so many thoughts about my schooling experience, right? And about the way my peers are constantly failed by this system, and by the way I am constantly failed by this system. And so I wrote this article and I published it, and it was um, it was the seed of a very long adventure was planted with this article. And a metaphor I like a lot is in this whole publishing this article process, I kind of got to see through the Matrix, right? The movie The Matrix. And what I mean by this is, I guess, again, there is kind of some sort of environment in which people, all of us, we are brought up, and a set of rules. And what this article allowed me to do was to see beyond that environment that I had been told was, my reality and the place where I belong. And so one aspect of that was, well, I published this article and strangers on the internet see it and read it and reply to it. And that was mind blowing as a teenager to realize, oh my God, I have a voice and some people will, discuss with me about my opinion. That was crazy. That is, I think, still to this day, an experience that very few teenagers get to have, whether at school or at home. The experience of being taken seriously, to being listened to, etc. And so fast forward a little later in life, I was 16 years old at this point. I decided to drop out, and dropping out was motivated mostly by two reasons. The first one, I was very unhappy at school, and I was so unhappy I felt like I wouldn't survive getting to the end of my school education, high school education. And the second reason was, at this point I was super rebellious and very decided that if no one cared about teenagers, I would be the one to give them a voice. I would be the one to create an alternative for all the misfits who have to go through this system. And so I dropped out. I moved out of my parents' house at 16, moved to Paris to get a job in an education startup. And this is kind of where I guess, my whole hero's journey, started, where, well, I was working full time in a startup at 16 with people way older than me. I very quickly started to get lots of opportunities to share my work. I built a program for young entrepreneurs to learn how to build projects. I wrote a book, Hack Your Education, in French. um yeah, and all that chapter of my life was really about it was really about, the sky is the limit. I'm looking up and I'm thinking the sky is the limit, like, whoa, I proved myself that I can shape my reality so much more than what people told me. um at some point, I kind of dropped out of that field as well. I was very burnt out, and I discovered the limits of the startup ecosystem and of the tech ecosystem. And I went traveling. I studied art therapy. I studied psychology. I studied under a shaman. I made a lot of art. And ultimately, yeah, I thought, okay, I have all these new tools. Now I know how to take care of myself. I know how to feel my limits and know when I'm about to burn out and don't not cross this limit. And I'm still very passionate about young people. And so finally, kind of the current arc of my life is getting back into education and into helping young people, build great things and giving them the resources and the right environments to grow. And yeah, most recently launched Nautilus, which is very much, that effort and a new iteration for this life's work that I'm doing.
Mm. I'm so grateful to you for sharing this story with me. I
Mhm.
really appreciate how you told it, and it's an exciting story and very clearly, you know, um, early and an amazing epic journey. So, uh, I want to ask first about France. And you said, oh, people have these associations with France as sort of Parisian culture, and that's a certain way. How would you characterize the culture that you grew up in?
Hmm. Um, my dad and my dad's family is from Algeria, so north of Africa. And Marseille, the city where I was born and grew up, is, as I said, by the Mediterranean Sea. And so I grew up very much in a Mediterranean culture. And what that means, what that looks like, oh, there are so many things. The first thing that comes to mind is food. There is this generosity in the food. There is this, this ritual of meeting every single week with your grandparents and your cousins, all the family, all the extended family to have a big meal with a lot of olive oil, with couscous, with lots of vegetables that have been cooked for a very long time, with tomatoes, vegetables that you know have been have grown under the sun. So kind of this like something about the generosity of the food is very representative of the generosity of this culture. It's a culture that prioritizes, humans, family, friends. It's a culture that uh, celebrates the sun and the water and all that. And so that's the culture I grew up in. And yeah, that was really, really important, I guess, in my upbringing. Um, when I was in high school, I would skip class all the time. And my high school was 10 minutes away from the sea. And so I would skip class and go to the sea, and I would, hang out there and think. And yeah, that is very, very important in my personal culture and way of life and personality.
Hmm. You said that your story begins at 14 when this incident happens, and I wonder if you can rewind just a little bit. Like, what were you like as a kid, and who is the protagonist, Zelda, at 14, right before this incident happens?
Yeah, wow. Um, I don't think you would think I like the 14 years old Zelda and me are the same people,
Mhm.
because I was very different and interested with very different things, I guess. As a kid, I was very exuberant. I loved theater. I loved expressing myself. I have older siblings, three older siblings, who would take me along their quests, whether it's a big party, or, just going with their friends somewhere. Um, so yeah, that was kind of my childhood. And I had as well lots of challenges with my family, and so lots of I guess uh not not feeling home at home for a while. Um and um and so yeah, 14 years old Zelda, she was partying a lot with older people than her. She was drinking, smoking a lot. Um, she was rarely in class. She was very often, with her friends who were also skipping their class. Uh, and yeah, I one thing that I can tell you that is still kind of a dream from my childhood, one of the few dreams I remember from my childhood that I realized, is traveling. So when I was very little, I was obsessed with the idea of traveling, and I would write stories about a protagonist that was pretty much me, traveling around the world, going to Sri Lanka, like really, I don't even know how I knew about Sri Lanka at like the age of 6 or 7, but I must have watched some documentaries. And so I guess that was a big thread in my life, traveling. So yeah, around that age, 13, 14, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I remember that I thought being a journalist is cool because that gives you the, if you're a reporter, you can write, like travel around the world to write papers. So that was one idea, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was really lost. And again, I was uninspired at home, uninspired at school. So I was, yeah, my soul was very, it was crushed, it was hungry, and it was starving. um yeah.
Hmm. You said that when this incident happened and you wrote the article, initially it was just going to be denouncing the incident itself, and then it sort of, I'm paraphrasing here, but like drew upon a well of existing anger at the school system and like misgivings about your education. And I wonder if you could speak to that, of your sense of how you were at the time, how you were underserved by your education, and what your
Mm.
thoughts were that you said at the time.
Something that always shocked me about the education system, the public education system, is the difference of treatment that is expected between students and teachers.
Mm,
So, as a student, right, you are always told you should respect your teacher, which is great, by the way. I think that should be the case. But what I have a problem with is the way teacher are expected to behave with students. And I just remember, being a victim of it, as well as many of my friends, a teacher who was going to humiliate you, uh, in front of all your peers in class because you did not understand something properly. Um, all that kind of play, like power play between teachers and students, that made me feel so angry. That because I think there is a big like cognitive dissonance from society about what we ask teenagers to be and to behave like, right? We always ask teenagers to behave like adults, but we never treat teenagers like they are adults. We never respect them like adults. We never give them responsibilities like adults. And that felt so unfair. And I actually feel emotional sharing that with you. Like I really remember that experience of feeling, like I was, the system kind of acted towards me like I was dumb and and not important. And and I think that was, yeah, that was really hurtful for me, and that was a big motivation to all the work that I've done since then, honestly.
mm. I'm struck by something you said about how you were surprised that people could respond to your article and share thoughts about it and respond to your opinions. And um, I guess I'm confused about why you wrote it, if that surprised you in the end, like if you like wanted people to read it. But like, what can you say more about that and your experience of that, like why you wrote it and then what surprised you about writing it?
Yeah, I think I wrote it for my peers, and specifically for this one peer who uh, got shamed by a teacher in a very, very, what I would say was a very traumatizing way. Um, and so I wrote it because I wanted to tell that peer, I know what happened and this is not normal and we should talk about it. And I wrote it for my peers in the rest of the classroom to tell them, look, this is not okay. We need to speak up as well, right? Like I'm not the only one who witnessed that. what do we do about that? Do we go and talk to another teacher or the director? Are they going to listen to us? Um, so I mostly wrote it for my peers, and I found this platform. It was Medium a couple years ago. It was very early Medium days. In France, few people used it. I don't remember how I found it. I was spending a lot of time already at this point on the internet, so I probably stumbled upon it, and I thought this was the right place to write and share my thoughts. And in a way, I wrote it like I was journaling. Um, and well, when I published it, I was in shock because, um, again, up till this point, my experience of interacting with adults was incredibly negative. I was not taken seriously. I was not treated as an equal. And so when I discovered those few comments, it didn't get super viral. It just got viral enough that a few strangers stumbled upon it. Um, and yeah, I still remember, reading those comments and thinking, wow, that's crazy that strangers read it, and that they talk to me like I'm an adult. And that shifted the script, right? That script that was telling me, I like because again, I mean, I guess you're pointing at another cognitive dissonance, that is, I that was my script to some extent, that I am not allowed to speak up. I am not allowed to, think that I'm an equal, but I'm going to rebel against it. But still, a part of me believes it. But I'm still going to rebel because I think it's wrong. But I don't know if that's wrong. Nobody told me, nobody that I would have, trusted told me, like, yeah, it's wrong. You need to talk about this. No, I was completely alone at this point in that whole thinking process. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Hmm. Hmm. Did your peers that you wrote it for read the article that you wrote?
Yeah, we did not interact a lot after it, but um, I remember having lots of conversations with peers, not her directly, but um, yeah, yeah, it definitely all my school read it.
Mm.
And actually I also sent it to the director.
Mm.
Yeah.
How was it received by the administration at the school?
Um, so so after that, I changed school because I thought, maybe it's not the school, like school in general, maybe it's just this school that's really bad. So I'm gonna try and change school. And so when I sent it, it was the end of the school year. I had nothing to lose at this point because I was changing school anyway. And I remember some peers who told me, like, when after the summer break, when they came back to school, that teacher was still there, and she kind of gave them a whole like speech about how she has had problems with the administration,
Mm.
that if we had a complaint, we should go up to her. Well, of course she would not have listened at all. She was a really crazy person, but she did not look like it didn't go so far that she would have, like, lost her job or something like that, although for the gravity of what she did, it should maybe have been the case. um but yeah, I think, if I remember correctly, she did got a little calmer and, less crazy the
Mm.
following year with my peers.
Mm. 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 And when you dropped out of school, what were you hoping for? What was it? What were you wanting that you hoped that that choice would help you get?
mm, I remember very clearly, I wanted to do an education revolution. This
Mm.
was the way I was wording it for myself and for the world. I thought, I'm going to make a school revolution. I'm going to replace the French school system. And once I have done that, I will, work really hard to make that change as well in the rest of the world. Um, and I had kind of two options to get this done. One was politics, which is you know, getting a job in the government and trying to make a change there. That seemed way too slow. I was very impatient. I wanted to get this done fast. So I thought, okay, what are other options? And this is when I discovered the world of startups. And in this world, people like me who want to solve problems in the world, they build companies, and there is this whole kind of model that allows you to very quickly make a big impact. And that was so powerful for me. That was incredible idea. And so this is why I decided to apply to all the education startups in France, um, hoping that someone would take me and I would learn what a startup is like. I didn't know how to do anything. I applied to be some sort of intern slash community manager because I used social media. So I thought, I use social media. I could probably, manage the social media of a company. And yeah, that was kind of the first step into the startup world. And um, I mean, nowadays the wording of that mission has changed, but in the essence, it's still very similar for me. What I'm working towards, working in service of. Yeah.
Hmm. How would you say you grew during the years that you were in Paris and working in startups and that sort of thing?
Ooh. Oh, it was such a crazy chapter of my life. I was 16 years old. The only stuff I had known up till this point was public high school, right? Public school. And I'm in Paris by myself. Um, and I work in a company with people who are much older than me. So it was something to be a teenager in a world of adults, in a world in which finally I was given responsibilities. It was so exhilarating. Um, and yeah, that shaped me in so many ways. I think the first thing that's coming up is my ambition. Um, I well, I was very ambitious already, but I think again, I was still carrying a lot of narratives that were incredibly limiting for being able to live up to this ambition and for doing the work that I wanted to do. And I got to meet very inspiring people, mentors who gave me their trust, and that kind of grounded that ambition, right? And that um, helped me believe that it was just not a dream of a young girl in the south of France. It was something that I could actually achieve. And so these years were really spent building this toolbox to achieve this. I worked really closely with a big accelerator in Europe, and they really, took me in their team and taught me so much about startups, got to shadow so many of the office hours they would do with entrepreneurs. So that built a lot of wisdom about the way startups work, the way you build a project from the ground up. Um, yeah, that was something pretty significant. Um, And something else that's coming up is, so once I got started with this entrepreneurship program and then published my book, I made a lot of noise in France about this. And I was 18 years old when I published the book. So still, kind of a teenager. And I got all those articles in the press. And it was kind of a full circle moment from this first article that I published on Medium and that three people read to kind of being like this person who gets interviewed by those big media in France. And that I think really as well again grounded me in, yeah, it's like a validation, right? It was mostly a validation, and I think that I really needed this. I really needed this. I was struggling a lot with my confidence, uh and for the first time, yeah, that just kind of validated like, hey, I'm not crazy. Hey, I'm weird, but that's okay. Hey, I I take all these crazy decisions with my life, but it's working. Um, and I'm opening a path for teenagers. I'm walking the path, and I'm given the chance to share about this and to share a story that I would have needed so badly a couple years earlier. Um, so yeah, those years were really important in shaping who I am for sure.
Mhm. What did your parents and family make of this chapter of your life and, leading up to you dropping out and you going to Paris and all of that?
Um, my mom was certainly not happy about me dropping out. She herself dropped out in very different conditions. And so for her, I had the chance to finish high school, and that I would not take that chance was honestly, yeah, really, really hard for her to understand. Um, and I would say at this point, so upon dropping out, my family was mostly unavailable, really, to advise me, support me emotionally with all the turmoil that I was going through. And so I was very much by myself. And I took this decision and I told my mom, if you try and force me to stay in high school, I'm going to show up the day of the final exam of high school, which is the exam that allows you to go or not to go to university. And I'm not gonna write anything on this exam. And I'm gonna fail. And I yeah, that will be a lost year as in a different way, right? So I told her that, and then I was like, okay, I'm moving out and I'm gonna go and live my life now. So I was, I guess that's pretty representative of like kind of the stubbornness and the rebelliousness that was shaping my mood and my experience at the time. Um, and I would say the first few years after that, I was, not really going back to my hometown. I was very much living my life in Paris. And fast forward a couple years, now we're in a very good relationship. And I think that from, publishing this book to the media, which are kind of credentials in a way, that reassured my mom and my dad that, yeah, actually it's all right. She's doing her thing and she's successful and she's figuring it out. And so now they're super supportive, and yeah, they help me a lot. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. What advice would you give your past self about how to relate to your family at that time?
Hmm. It's a tough one for giving general advice. So many young people come up to me and ask me about how to deal with this. It's hard to do general advice. I mean, you know, in my case, I don't regret doing it this way. I think it would have been very hard to convince them. So I just had to in a way do something very radical, which is to cut that bond for a while, right? um and while I don't recommend that to anyone, I think that this is sometimes the hero's journey, right? Is about doing this, taking these very difficult decisions, um to be able to live up to your destiny, to live up to your mission. um One thing that I cannot recommend more for young people who are dealing with this kind of challenges is to give empathy to your family, understand where they're coming from with the way they see the world. I don't think I understood as well why it was so difficult for my mom to, you know, having to experience me dropping out in relation to her own story. So having empathy for your family, understanding where they're coming from with the way, you know, they think about this, but also, you know, but like empathy doesn't mean no boundaries. Like again, I think if you're a teen and you reason well, you can take your own decisions, and when you take decisions, you're like bold decisions, you're always going to disappoint people. um but more often than not, your family will forgive you because they love you, and one day probably you will have proven them that they were wrong, you know? And from there, if you're happy, this is all they want, right?
Mm.
So it's kind of a mix of like, hey, empathy is great. Um Sharing your experience is great. That also allows them to understand better if in case one day you want to drop out or do something that's different. If you have kind of if you kept them posted to what you're doing and the way you're thinking, they will probably come as less of a shock. Maybe you can prepare them. um but yeah, in the end, I'm kind of a proponent of, hey, you know, you're gonna disappoint people, you're going to disappoint your parents. That's, I mean, life is very much like that sometimes. And for me, more importantly than, you know, following my parents' dream is my dreams, my life. How do I, you know, like my future children, how do I build a life so that my life is better than the ones of my parents and my children's life is better than mine? And that comes with, you know, accepting that the world is changing and going with that, not with the outdated version of your parents' world.
Mm. I want to zoom in on the stubbornness. What do you think the boundaries were that you had at the time that you were really standing for in that stubbornness?
I mean, I think that there is a bit of an archetype with teenagers and their rebelliousness, their stubbornness. So in that way, I was not so different from my peers. Um, but I guess I was different in that I was stubborn enough to do something that like most people wouldn't have done and take it that far. Um, it's hard to say honestly what motivated that stubbornness. As I mentioned earlier, I felt like school was killing me. And I'm saying this, you know, very like literally. I was extremely depressed. I was struggling with my mental and physical health. And I, in a way, that stubbornness was also some kind of survival type of reaction. Pulling myself out of school was just like the only way, and I'm not exaggerating at all. It was what felt the only way to survive. Um, and I Yeah, so I had to do it. There were no, you know, oftentimes people will kind of mirror the story with, you know, qualities like courage. And I always say, for me at the time, the courageous option would have been to stay in school to make my mom happy. That would have been the courageous path. Leaving school was just like something you do to survive, right? And yeah, yeah, that's what's coming up.
Tell me about the book that you wrote and what it said, and maybe what you learned from writing it as well.
Hmm. Um, this book to me was a way to share all the tips and tricks for other teenagers to hack their education, as per the title. And what hacking your education means to me is, again, we live in a world, there's a set of rules. We were told to follow these rules. Um, but a lot of rules, some rules are good and some rules are really useless, and sometimes they're even bad. And so what hacking your education means is learn to be conscious of those rules and learn to reason in order to follow the rules that make sense for you and to ignore the rules that don't make sense at all. And so all this book is about is learning to make those rules conscious, and what that looks like practically is, doing self-exploration and kind of getting the opportunity to understand the way your brain works better, and raising some questions that may be eye-opening for, yeah, your role in this world and your role in school and your role in family and your family and stuff like that. And then one aspect is, okay, how can you learn as fast as possible and as good as possible so that you can work the minimum, have good grades so your teachers and parents are happy and leave you alone, so that you can use that extra time to actually make things that are meaningful for you, pursue a hobby or a project. Um, so this is what the book is about, and this book was incredibly important for me to write. Um, that kind of the publishing of this book marks the end of this first arc for me. I I was very, very perfectionist, and I kind of, as I mentioned, burned myself out after in the process of writing this book and leading some other projects. And so it was a wonderful creative experience. It was an experience that hurt me and, forced me to kind of take a 2 years break outside of this field. Um, but it was, yeah, it was an extremely important experience, and one that, um, again, allowed me to share my story to more teenagers, which really was so, so important for me.
Hmm. Hmm. Can you give me some examples of those kinds of rules that you were becoming attuned to and encouraging people to be attuned to, and like the ones that made sense and ones that you thought were sort of useless or didn't make sense?
Mm. All right. One that's coming up, I've already touched on it a little, but there are I don't know how much is going to relate to the American school system, which I guess most of your listeners have been through or are mostly acquainted with. Um, in France, we have those coefficients, and what that means is some, some activities, some subjects will be more important than others in the grades that you get. And so, what I'm proposing in this book is, can like, if school is not your thing, how can you be smart about the subject that you study so that you get, again, good grades and kind of, your teachers and your parents leave you alone, so that you can do the things that you're actually interested in. And so I developed this whole kind of like little table where people could kind of think, okay, like, I really suck at math, but it has this very, very big coefficients. um I really, really love like English, which is a foreign language in France. It has a lower coefficient, but if I get a very good grade, so kind of, how can you, of course your teachers and school is going to tell you that you should be good at everything, but how can you actually think about it in a smarter way and prioritize one was going to bring you the most important coefficient up so that your like the world leaves you alone, to strategize to study the things that you are actually passionate about, or the things that will be useful for you. um, so yeah, that's one rule I would say that was pretty high priority for me to teach teenagers. Think more smartly about what you study in school so that you optimize to have more free time.
I'm really struck by you having this burnout experience as a teenager, and a lot of people have, at least that I've heard from, tend to have burnout experiences later in life. And so I'm curious to ask, like, how do you understand what that burnout experience was and what the causes of it were and what happened to you?
Hmm. The way I explain it to myself is I had found finally my life mission that was crystal clear, but I did not find in the startup ecosystem ways to take care of my inner world nearly enough. And so I was very much, focused on the outer world. How do I help more people? How do I help teenagers? And so, in service of that, and what I understood through this experience of kind of burnout was that this was not enough and that I needed to urgently start loving myself and taking care of myself, and taking care of that, you know, that energy that I need to show up for others. It was the only way I could keep doing this work. That was the realization of the time that kind of unfolded, over weeks and months as I started to look into what this exhaustion, this physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual exhaustion was about. Um, I did not do any sport. I did not take any breaks. I didn't have a space in which I could express myself in a very authentic way. Um, I mean, I could do that through work, but work was, responsibilities and kind of expectations. So I didn't have a space in which I could just, have fun, play, and all that. And so the following 2 years after the launch of my book were really about cultivating this inner world, and um, as well as, looking back at my childhood and kind of mm, looking at wounds that had accumulated and doing all this work to really heal and get to know myself, and also ask myself, do I really want to work in education? Right? At this point, I was 18 and all that I knew in life was high school and startups, and I wanted to see more of the world. I was craving for giving myself the chance to, again, if I'm going to preach to people that they should explore the world and do things they're passionate about, I needed to walk that path. And at this point, I did not feel like I was walking that path anymore. Um, so I dropped out a second time. I dropped out of the startup world.
Would you say that experience of burnout was similar to or different from the experience you had preceding your dropout from high school, where you're sort of depressed and having a hard time managing your physical and most mental and emotional health?
In some ways, it was really similar because I had reached a point where I was too big for a culture and an environment, and um, and that culture and that environment did not really give me the permission to grow in new ways, to be different, to be even weirder. And, um, there are, again, I love startups, I love tech. I think those are incredible ecosystems of people and amazing culture, lots of things that I resonated with, still resonate to this day. Um, but I think that if you only follow the precepts of the startup world, you're not gonna be a happy person. And that was kind of, I had reached a limit in that world. And so I needed more inputs
Hmm.
to grow into a new version of myself.
Hmm. What advice would you give your past self, either at 16 or 18, for how to deal with that series of challenges?
It's a tricky question because I am very in love with who I am today. And so I can't really, I don't want to change a
Hmm.
single thing about the struggle I went through because this is really what has shaped me into who I am today. Um, mm, mm. You know, it may be going to sound funny, but I think I did a very good job. I wouldn't want to change anything. And, you know, I, an advice can be very useful, but also to what extent an advice is just, some movements in the air that doesn't really land because that person that is younger, less experienced, just is not ready to understand that, right? The things that are coming up for me is, yeah, I really wish, I would have been in a place where I could have just a tiny bit be kinder to myself because I was going through so much and I was so hard with myself. But if I would have given this advice to my younger self, would she had understood and changed the way she would have related with herself? I don't think she would have been capable of doing that. Um, yeah.
Hmm. What did you learn in those 2 years about how to care for yourself and how to love yourself and what you enjoyed and what you needed?
Wow. I learned so much. First, I learned that my body is amazing. To At this point in my life, my body was really just, a machine that was carrying my brain into doing things in the world. I learned that my body is amazing and so incredibly intelligent. I started to dance, and one of these 2 years I spent dancing full time, studying dancing, studying dance therapy, and that really changed my chemistry. It changed the way I relate to myself and I relate to the world. It changed my posture when I talk to someone. um it Yeah, it healed a lot of the depression that I had struggled with for so many years. um and after I spent this whole chapter dancing, I moved to Mexico. And Mexico for me was really a chapter or a land that taught me about love, about unconditional love. Um, I met people who are so loving and who really taught me about what is unconditional love. And yeah, that was as well very, very powerful journey. Um, and yeah, I think Mexico is a land that's incredibly potent and uh it's hard to describe, you know. Of course there were relationships, but the land itself, I just, you know, if you look beyond the surface, uh it just, the land carries something that really like screams love, love. And that was, you know, a summary of my experience in Mexico is love, love, be loved, let yourself be loved. um yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. That's beautiful. Can you tell me any stories from that chapter of your life that are especially meaningful or you think I might enjoy hearing?
Yeah. um well, the most eventful story of my trip in Mexico is an accident that I had, where I had what looks like a stroke. And you know that doctors at first explained like a stroke. And still to this day, I don't exactly know what happened to me, but the current, you know, kind of label is Takotsubo, which is in English, it's the name of that thing, but which was coined by a Japanese doctor. In English, it's often called the syndrome of the broken heart.
Hmm.
And so basically, when you go under very stressful events, sometimes you have that happen to you, and it really, your heart is really like acting like it's a stroke, but you do not get as much consequences. It's not as damaging physically. Um, and that accident, you know, it really opened the path for me with um, understanding better who I am spiritually. Um, it opened the path into learning more about the native healing practices of the indigenous from central Mexico. After this accident, I moved to a new location across the country to study under a teacher, psychotherapist, shaman, friend, mentor. Um, and that was a big, big focus in my life uh, for a while. So hmm, that was a big, big, big event, big story from that journey, from that trip. Yeah.
Hmm. What kinds of things did you learn from that shaman?
Mm, trying to think what is the most interesting that I can share, because there are too many things. Um, I learned to orient myself. I learned to orient myself. I learned to make meaning much better. Um, a lot of what shamanism is, the way I understand it today, is kind of an invisible language that you learn to speak. And this is a symbolic language, a meaning making language, a metaphorical language. And I got to learn a little bit how to speak this language. And it's a language that really helps you orient yourself much better. Um, that that opens up a lot of new ways to be with yourself and with the world.
How would you say it changed you during that time?
That learning that,
Oh, well, that those practices that you're exposed to.
hmm, mm, it made me much more loving. It made me more whole. I, yeah, I went on a journey in finding all those parts of myself that I had, you know, thrown away a very long time ago, and went and, looked at them and welcomed them back. It's still a process, right? But I think that time was really spent making myself whole again, and dancing this balance between this inner world, taking care of this inner world, but not getting lost in it, because there is a mission. There is, this desire to be in service of the world that is also very important to me. So kind of the dance between the two. How are you in service, and how do you take care of that energy that allows you to be in service? Um, yeah.
Hmm. How did that chapter of your life come to a close?
I was still in Mexico, and I was making a lot of art, and I was, yeah, I was, very much in myself. I was very much still in that process of unearthing all the things. And I got into a crisis for about a week where I was like, okay, I thought the spending time in my inner world was the answer to all of my problems. But turns out I'm not very connected to my mission in this world. And I spent a week uh just putting post-it everywhere in my room, and like hardcore brainstorming on, okay, do I want to be an artist? Do I want to be a monk? Do I want to be a shaman? What do I want? What do I commit to? How do I show up to be in service of the world? Because that part was missing at this point. And at the end of that week, I was like, okay, I want to be I want to head back into this startup world, because I still believe that um, the tools and the people in that ecosystem can help me achieve that mission that is so important for me still. And that means I need to leave Mexico. I need to go to a city, probably in the US, where there are lots of those people who work on startups, and who think about education. And yeah, I'm going to pose that big investment in time into my art, and I'm going to get back at, that craft in education. And so that was kind of the end of this chapter and the beginning of the current chapter I'm in, where, I uh I'm dancing that work in startups, as well as um this all these practices that help me stay grounded into my best self and doing my best work.
Hmm. What kind of art were you making?
I was doing a lot of dancing, and I was doing some writing. I did some sculpture. I did lots of mixed media, but I would say my main craft, my main art was like performance and dancing.
Hmm. Hmm. Beautiful. You've mentioned several times this idea of a mission or like a quest or something like that, and I wonder how you think about that and how that concept entered your life.
Hmm. A lot of times people ask me, how do you find that in life? And my current answer is that it is very similar to finding a life partner. And there are kind of two energies at play. One, you need to explore and be open for that to happen to you, for that life mission or that partner to enter your life. So you need to believe, you need to have faith that this is possible, right? And two, you need to commit to it. And this is kind of where, in a way, the marriage is such a great, powerful structure, because you don't build a great life with someone if you're not fully committed to it, and you don't build some very impactful thing if you're not greatly committed to your work, to that one mission that you feel passionate about. And so there is that sense of uh, hey, you decide, one day you decide that is going to be my life work. I know that I decided that's going to be my life work. I could have been an artist. I decided that I was going to, make this work in education. And one day maybe that changes, right? But I yeah, yeah, that whole process I think is really important, and something that I again talk a lot about, because I think especially in my generation we have the blessing and the curse of having so many options. And so we broke away from all those systems, from marriage, to as well like the concept that you're gonna inherit from the craft of your parents, right? So you don't have choice on your career. And it's great, but also you know uh always changing your mind about a partner or about a craft, I think is uh is not going to make you very happy. At least that's my experience. um I feel like I did not answer to your question, but that was what's coming up.
Hmm. No, you answered a lot of it. I'll ask more, but just trying to sit with it in my body to feel how to ask this question. I really appreciate that you have a clear sense of your mission and that there is a mission for you. And I relate to it because I have something like that and I have a way of relating to it. And uh, I guess there's something about how you relate to what a mission is that I'm curious to ask about um, for you, is a mission something that you can, like some people never get married, for example, and is a mission like that where you could just decide not to have one, or does everyone have one, or what do you think missions are in relation to what it means to be alive?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. What that connects me to is this whole debate about what are we born with. um and my I live my life. We don't know what are we born with. Are we born with a mission? Are we born creative? It's really hard to tell. The way I live my life is from the idea or the belief that we are born with potential. We're all born with something unique that we have to contribute to the world. It's not proven or disproven. It's, it's what I have believed to be kind of my faith, one of the guiding lights of my life, and I base my understanding of the world on that. Um, and so from that perspective, I definitely think that we are born with, again, something that we were meant to uniquely contribute to. And um and I think a lot of times what we are meant to uniquely contribute to is the thing that, in a way, society makes us feel like is not good about us.
Mm,
So in my case, I was unhappy at school, and school made me feel like I was, I was the problem, right? Um, and and to realize that I was not the problem and that my peers were not the problem either became my life's work. It became that guiding force that inspires all my work. So very oftentimes I think a life mission lies into whatever the world has made you feel like is not good about yourself. I think it shows up in different ways as well, but that's one thing that comes up. Um, and and I think it changes as well. Like, absolutely, I think it changes. I think it refines itself. So when I dropped out, I talked about education revolution. Now I talk about it very differently. So it refines itself. Um, yeah. And the one last thing I would add, I tweeted about this recently. I said, walk into every room like God sent you to build whatever you're building. And um, of course, there are times where you don't need to believe in God, by the way, to to kind of move in the world with that kind of energy. Um, what it means in very like less spiritual terms, I guess, is like move in the world, enter every room like you are this person that we've been waiting for since the dawns of humanity to be working on what you're working, right? And walk through the world feeling confident that the sum of all your experiences makes you uniquely fitted to contribute whatever you're working on to the world. And that is that is a practice. That is like having a faith and praying every day. That requires this, like, every single day, this spending time thinking about this mission, this, working towards this mission, even if you don't, even if it's not central in your life, that requires this, yeah, again, this commitment, this showing up every single day. um and it's not easy. It's like doing sport, right? I mean, I don't want to do sport every day, but I know it's good for me, so I still do it. This kind of stuff, right? Or brushing your teeth. You do it because you know that this uh, just improves your quality of life in a way. And yeah, I think it's the way I think about it.
mm, mm. Really appreciate you answering that question. Mm. Um, how would someone take your advice with that tweet? How does someone actually do it? How does someone walk into a room like God sent them to be there? What is that? You said a bit about it, but they're like, no, no, really, what does that mean? How do I do it?
um, it is really similar to, growing into your faith if you're religious, or growing into your love if you are in a relationship with someone. Um, it takes work, it takes reps, to grow that confidence, to grow this commitment that then, just shines through you in every moment of the day. Um, it takes time. It takes time. It takes showing up every day, right? And to some extent, it also takes doing it for others, I think. I don't think that it hits as much if that missions that mission is really tied to uh your own life. Again, that's, I think, what is powerful about it is um being in service of others. This is where this is when the light starts to shine even stronger, right? um it's hard to explain, but uh yeah, I meet people every day who have this light shining for so many different things. um and one simple way to practice it, uh talk with the people that you want to help. Sometimes we get caught up with all these grand visions, and we think, oh, I, need to spend time on my computer scamming this vision and doing all those very sophisticated things. But the the food for that light to shine is in talking with the people you want to help, and figuring out how to help them, even if it's not exactly, uh if it's not exactly aligned with the ultimate vision. How every day can you serve one person that, is among the community of people that you want to support? um it's a very, like, humbling work, and it is the work. It is all that you have to do. Then all the rest is, um it organizes itself to happen. But the first step is really to show up for one person every day, or even just once a week.
Mhm. How do you recognize that light when you see it in other people?
Well, it's really like the sunlight, except it's invisible. It doesn't hurt the eyes, but it's nourishing. It's something that is very nourishing about the interaction with someone. Um, you can see it in the eyes, you know. It, and I don't want to make it sound magical, but it is literally the eyes changing. They get a little bigger, and some sort of, maybe there is a light smile that appears when someone is telling you about them and about what they work on. um as well, I just want to learn more. When I notice that I want to learn more about what someone is working on, that means that there is something about them that shines and that is very attractive. It's very attractive. And so even though I don't understand at all what they're exactly working on, I want to learn everything about it, right? Um, we all had, or most of us probably had, a teacher maybe who had that light when they share about this very niche historical event or concept. And yeah, it's so good. Suddenly that makes you want to pay attention.
Mm. How has your sense of your own mission in relation to education changed over time?
The essence has not changed a lot. The wording um, has changed. The way it looks like has changed because the world changes, because I change as well. Um, right now with Nautilus, I can see how that current iteration of my life's work is getting really, really, really close to my my dream, something that, I have dreamt of a couple years ago and that I have finally, that I'm finally capable of putting out in the world. And one thing in particular about Nautilus that makes me very um not proud, but just feeling like, oh, this that juice, it's so good. It's exactly the way I wanted it to be, and what I believe in is this cross-pollination aspect that happens at Nautilus because we're not just a program for young entrepreneurs. We're for young entrepreneurs, young artists, young scientists, community builders, and that idea that we can create a space in which people across fields can meet each other is so important to me. It is something that I have been thinking about for years. Um, I never understood why, fields are separated so rigidly in school. And so to be able to kind of offer that space in which entrepreneurs and artists and technologists can meet each other it's magical to me. It's wow. I'm so happy. I'm so excited. Um, so yeah, it's like each iteration, right? Each new experience allows me to get closer to that dream of building that school vision that I have been feeling inside of me since I was a teen. And um yeah,
Hmm. Can you say briefly how you think about your mission now?
my mission is to help young people by giving them resources and an environment in which they can build and create the things they are passionate about, as well as explore, get to know themselves, grow into amazing and fulfilled adults, um, as well as making an impact on our society's culture and rewriting the narrative that young people shouldn't be taken seriously. So, showing by the means of Nautilus and of the work of these young people that young people should be taken seriously, that they are capable of so much, that we need to give them more responsibilities, um, and more opportunities to impact our world and to make it a brighter, cooler, and more fun and playful world to live in.
Well said.
Thanks.
I love people who can say this. So good job being able to say it and to say it so beautifully.
Thank
Um,
you.
how is that different than an education revolution?
It is more nuanced. uh, for better or worse. I think the education revolution, what's better with this wording is it just, cuts through and people pay attention when you say radical stuff, right? Or controversial stuff. Um, but I love the nuance of the way I phrase my mission today better.
Mm.
And um, I to add on to that a little more, um, for a very long time, I was focused on how to destroy school. And now I'm focused on how to build new, spaces for young people. And unfortunately, I think in a world, no matter which, big important topic you can think of, we're very focused on criticizing and destroying. And I think we need more of building and creating and inspiring. It's harder, but we need a lot of it right now in the world.
What experiences caused you to have that shift? How did you learn that for yourself that you wanted to reframe how you approach your mission?
What's coming up is, um, I, through learning how to accept myself more fully, I have learned to accept the world better. And what I mean by that is, there will always be things I don't like about myself. And that's okay. And there will always be things I don't like about the world, and that's okay as well, right? Um, how do I focus on the things that I enjoy about myself and about the world? And how do I make even more of that? Um, we live in a world in which people don't love themselves enough. And when you don't love yourself, you all your focus is toward the things you don't like about yourself. And I think that is a very important mirror with the way people interact in the world, and the way people think we're going to solve the problems in the world and stuff like that. You can't you can't make all the problems about yourself or about the world disappear. You can only build more of the things that you love. That is what has profoundly impacted the way I do my work.
Am I right to connect that to what we talked about with burnout and you learning to find joy and love in your work?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. It is exhausting when the source of your inspiration is your anger. And it was a driving force for me at the time. And I'm very grateful for it because it allowed me to kind of make my first steps in the world and my work. But it is not sustainable. You need to learn to fall in love with the people that you serve instead of, that shared anger with those people, or. So yes, I it totally that burnout was the beginning of a massive shift in my way to relate to the world and myself and my work.
Mm. Would you say that you're angry at existing systems of education now?
Hmm. It Thinking about that takes very little of my energy right now. It takes very little of my energy. I
Uh-huh.
am so laser focused on the people I want to serve, and interacting with them and understanding them and helping in any way I can to solve their problems. So like you asked me this question, I think I had not think about school for a while.
That's great.
It's just like, I mean, yes, of course, it makes me super mad when I read that, that there is this study about the amount of suicide among teenagers. And if you compare like the time during the year, it significantly increases at the beginning of the school year and across the school year, and completely decreases during school break or any break.
Hmm.
And I'm like, what the fuck? That makes me mad. That makes me mad. That makes me want to destroy everything, right? But yeah, that makes me feel grief, that makes me feel grief for my younger self and again for my peers. But so I still feel grief. I still feel anger. I still feel grief. But does that drive my work? Not really anymore, no.
Hmm. Incredible. Incredible. I love that answer so much. I love that you're connected to that and it's not that you've forgotten it or repressed it, but that it's not the thing that's fueling you anymore. And instead, what's fueling you is this desire to serve and to help. It's
Mm,
beautiful.
mm. Thank you.
Hmm. You said, this is in your Twitter bio right now, that 1517 believed in you first. What does that mean? What does it mean that they believed in you?
Yay! I love to talk about 1517. So, for context, if someone doesn't know what 1517 Fund is, 1517 Fund was built by two incredible people, Daniel Struckman and Michael Gibson, and their life mission is as well to support young people, especially misfits, to build great companies and to build technology. We like to call it, sci-fi tech technology that's going to change the way we live in the world. And Daniel and Michael, before building 1517, they were also the founders of Teal Fellowship, which is a fellowship that gives you 100K to drop out of school and get full time on your project. It's been over like 10 years that they're at it, right? They want to help the misfits, they want to help the dropouts, the people who want to live their education differently. And so their philosophy, their way to do their work is extremely different from your average VC. And when I first met Danielle, I had cold emailed her, and right after a first, Zoom call, like half an hour, I was on my way to San Francisco, and she had offered me to stay in her house because I was pretty broke and San Francisco is expensive, the Bay Area. And so I stayed in her house for a week. And that is, just one way they believed in me first. They gave me the chance to, have a home in the Bay. And that was over a year ago. No, this year when I properly decided to work with them, Danielle knew that I wanted to build a gap program. I wanted to build something. I didn't know, Nautilus had not made it to my consciousness yet. And so I was just like, I want to build something and I don't know why. And I really, I really needed a vote in confidence at this point. Um, and Danielle was like, you know what? We're going to pay you at 1517. We're going to hire you. You're going to do some stuff for a community and you think about what you want to build. And, we give you that space to work on whatever you want. And that was, yeah, that was kind of hard to believe at first. But they fucking did it. Um, and again, I really want to insist on the fact that I didn't know what I was going to build. I had this track record. They knew we were aligned philosophically speaking. I was going to build an education. but I had not, I had a few like sketches, but nothing really serious. And so that allowed me that financial stability allowed me to really make space for this creative inspiration to come. And this is basically how Nautilus was formed. Thanks to that support, I was able to do a lot of user interview over the summer, from people that I wanted to be in service of. And little by little, that vision came together, and they were and are still supporting all the way. So they believed in me even before I had anything to show them. And that is very, very representative of their way to work with people.
Hmm. So beautiful.
Mhm.
What did you say in that email that you sent Danielle?
I wanted a job at 15, 17. So I don't exactly remember. I was like, you know, I mean, it was so crazy to discover TR fellowship and 15, 17, because at the time when I dropped out, I didn't know it existed. I had not watched, I don't know, the social network. I did not know that there were a culture that was growing and getting more and more importance in the United States, where people would say, hey, dropping out is great. I was in France where like the academia is even, much, much more important in society with the way you interact with others. And so, we kind of like, when I heard of them, I was like, oh wow, like I I'm doing this work. They're doing it as well. They're doing it even better. That's amazing. I have so much to learn from them. So yeah, I basically share that story. I share that story in a very brief way. And she accepted to get on a call with me.
Hmm. If you had to guess, what do you think Danielle saw in your email and when she first did a call with you that made her believe in you?
Oh, oh, that makes me very emotional to think about this. Um, hmm, hmm. One thing that Danielle has shared with me, or the way she has introduced me to people since then, I think from that understanding, I think maybe something that touched her is kind of this mix of having a drive and being kind of relentless about my work while being emotionally pretty intelligent and attuned. And that mix is not extremely common in the world of startups. So I think that touched her. Um, yeah,
Hmm.
probably something along those lines. But she takes calls with lots of young people. She
Hmm.
is incredibly generous with her time.
Hmm. Part of the reason I'm asking is Danielle has believed in me, and
Mm,
I'm really grateful for that friendship. And so it's nice to hear
mm.
about
Mhm.
how she supported
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Danya is amazing.
Yeah.
Shout out to Danya.
Yeah,
She's the
definitely.
best.
Hmm.
Yes. Mm.
So tell me about Nautilus and the project that you're launching.
Yeah. Nautilus is a 3-month gap program for young artists, scientists, entrepreneurs, community builders, you name it. Any craft that a young person would be passionate about is welcome here. And for 3 months, they move into this community house that we're gonna have in San Francisco, rent free, food free. We pay for all the bills, and we give as well a stipend for the equipment. And it's basically 3 months where you do whatever the heck you want. So while there are some guest teachers who are going to come, many opportunities to learn from mentors and from your peers, really the concept of Nautilus is okay, you have the time and space to work on that thing that you've been wanting to work on for so long. How far can you get into this craft? How deep can you dive into what sets your soul on fire? Um, that is the concept of Nautilus. We're selecting between 8 and 12 participants, 22 years old and under. And you have to be fully committed. You need to, take a break from school or from work, come to San Francisco, and that's basically it.
Hmm. What was your thinking with those different variables, like it being 3 months or 22 and under, or giving people a stipend or giving them that space? Like what was behind this? Like when you started working with 15, 17, you're already thinking about something of a gap program. How did this particular program form? Why this structure?
It was so hard because I love, there are so many things that should exist in the world of education. And so it's hard to pick one variable and commit to it, but it is important to commit and to build for a specific group of people. So I spent the whole summer, as I mentioned, doing this user research, and the three things that kept coming up across the schools were: one, if you want to take a gap year, it costs money. A lot of people don't have the means to finance their gap year. Two, um, gap years are not popular enough that if you decide to take one, you're gonna have any peers that you know who are taking one as well that you can kind of have this shared experience with. And three, a lot of young people are kind of anxious about losing time. So they want this mentorship to make sure that they're making the most out of their experience. And so based on those three things, I put together this concept. Um, I decided for 22 years old and under, for one, because I am passionate about, young people. That's always the people I wanted to serve, and still to this day, it is true. I don't think that I am capable of serving people of all ages. And to me, uh, the best, version of the future of education is not some sort of magical new one size fits all system. It is a world in which people want to serve their people, and so they kind of tailor an experience that works very well for their people. I think that teenagers and young adults, uh, or rather, um, I think that becoming an adult, has, because of our culture, many different reasons, it got delayed, partially because of school and because we're given so little responsibilities. And one way I think about this program is, how do I give the space to this bunch of young people, um, to, practice being an adult, practice living in a community, practice, disagreements and problem solving and all that stuff. That is really interesting to me. So that's why the age limit. And um and 3 months. So when it comes to 3 months, it's really you know kind of decision making. You need to try something, you need to iterate, and so you have to start somewhere. When I first went to the drawing board, the program was 1 year long. When I went back to the drawing board, it was 6 months long. Literally up to 2 days before the launch, it was 6 months long. And then I was like, no, it's 3 months. And one reason why I decided to make it 3 months is that when you launch something new, you want to have an iteration cycle that's a little fast. And if, in order to kind of have insights, you need to wait an entire 6 months, you may have died. Like by the end of it, you're maybe dead, right? So in terms of like the resources that I have, that just made more sense to do 3 months. A very practical reason as well is that I wanted it to be international, and for most, foreigners, you can have fairly easily a 3 month visa, but over 3 months it gets much more complicated. So that was as well one big reason why I went for 3 months. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. I think it's perfect. I'm like, yes, that's that's right. Uh, it's a very particular and sort of in the weeds question, but I thought the website is so beautiful, and I assume you used AI art generators to make a lot of it, but you know, and the art is beautiful. It's really well done. But I wonder if you could say, in a way, I've never really seen a website like that before, and I don't quite know what it is. So I want to hear from you how you thought about making the website.
Yeah, thank you so much. It means a lot. A lot of love and sweat has been put into the branding.
Hmm.
The way I explain the branding to people is Italian Renaissance meets Ghibli art.
Mm.
That's kind of the vibe I was going for. I collaborated with a designer who's a high school dropout as well and friend of mine. I was mostly, leading the whole art direction. I had super strong opinions. And he executed and coded the website and that stuff. Um, how did it come through? I mean, so for one, I had experience kind of putting together brandings for previous projects. So I think, that's as simple as that kind of, hey, in order to have taste and know what kind of branding you're going for, you need to practice that across multiple projects. Um, I I have great resources on design from from when I was a teenager working in this accelerator. So I've got a lot of inspiration from kind of those resources, and hanging out with people who have incredible taste and like some sort of like magical divine ability to create very impactful branding. Um, I'm glad that you think it's the first time you see a website like that, because honestly, I really didn't want to go down the road of kind of most of the website I see for programs that are in some way similar to Nautilus. I wanted it to be playful. I wanted it to be beautiful. I wanted it to be opinionated. A lot of websites nowadays, they're like black and white, and like we're gonna be the most minimalist possible, and I'm a maximalist in the extent of like good taste, at least my preference. um I think you want to be extremely opinionated, and you want people when they land on your website or see a visual from your work, you want them to kind of, uh, I guess, enter your world, You want them to have this experience, almost a psychedelic experience, where you want their vibe to shift just based on that aesthetic that you created. So it was like ambitious, and I didn't want to spend that much time on it either, because there is kind of this startup wisdom that you don't want to spend that much time working on your branding when you haven't even launched it and nobody knows about what you're working on. But I think I'm glad I did invest energy in it, because a lot of people really enjoyed it. And I think it really, really spoke to a lot of the young people I want to see as part of this community. So,
Mm.
hmm.
Mm. Um, what will the timeline be for when the 3 months is?
The first cohort starts in June
Mhm.
2025. So right now, as of December 9th, I am in the process of getting applications in. Amazing people have applied so far. And yeah, getting to know all those people. In January 2025, I'm going to do a tour of universities and schools, hopefully around the world. Let's see how far this gets me. But yeah, the goal is to go and meet a lot of young people in their day-to-day environment. And then it will be time to find a house and launch the first cohort. And from there, as long as we have funding, we will keep launching more cohorts.
Hmm. So that's June, July, August then.
Yes.
So let's fast forward to September 2025, and you've had the first cohort and it's gone splendidly. What is your hope? Like, what would make you so thrilled that it's gone so well? And, of course, you learned a lot and there were challenges, but like it went really well. What would make you so happy with the first cohort?
Hmm. I would really like it if, when you're this kind of projects, it takes time to show people why they are so important. I am going to work with very young people who are at the very early stage of their career. And so I don't know, what they will have done in this 3 months. The goal is to plant a seed more than to see a billion-dollar company like get off the ground, or the next big artist gets at the top of the billboard or something. Um, I I hope that, most of the participants will live that experience uh, feeling like their life and their way to interact with the world will never be the same. Um, I hope that they're, deeply informed of what they're capable of doing, that they've surprised themselves, and that they've grown both in skills and in wisdom and in confidence. Um, so that's on a more like individual level. On a cultural level, I would love that we get viral in some traditional media. I would love, I don't know, some sort of, if I dream and I kind of play, like it would be so funny if some sort of old media would make some sort of documentary, like what the heck is this house in which these young people live together? Are they trying to like make them drop out? What is this about? Like kind of, I would love like one of my dreams is that this culture that we're making gets mainstream, right? And so I'd love to kind of have this first like kind of bump with the mainstream world where like people, some random 13 years old hear about us, and then they think, oh wow, that maybe something I apply to in a couple of years, and maybe that changes the way they think about it, because they think, oh, this website is so beautiful, that's cool.
Hmm. Is there a youngest age that you'll accept?
I did not put a minimum age because it will really be case to case basis. That is, based on life story and kind of the person. They can be so incredibly wise and so ready to live independently by themselves in a house with other people. um that could be a 14 years old, that could be a 20 years old, right? We don't all get ready for this kind of experiences at the same age, so it will very much be case to case basis. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. I feel so nourished by everything that you've shared. It's really inspiring, and you definitely have this light in you. I knew that before this call, but it's nice to bathe in it for a couple of hours. And you've been very kind in answering my questions. I want to give you the opportunity if there's anything that you'd like to talk more about or talk about with me. we can do that. It's also fine to end here if you like. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for these very thoughtful questions, and this very, very, very active listening. I so appreciate it. Hmm. Yeah, I would love to hear you share um, maybe the way you resonate with that life experience that I shared. And yeah, the way you resonate maybe in your own education and potential obstacles that you had to go over as a teen or as a young adult or right now with your, learning journey and growing into this awesome person that you are.
Hmm. What comes up is how not angry I was at the time at my education. I just kind of took it for granted, and how, in retrospect, yeah, I wouldn't say it makes me angry per se, but I feel underserved by it in retrospect, and it's exactly the way it needed to be, and I wouldn't be who I am now without it. But the way that it seemed to me is there was a very specific concept of what a good student was, or what education was, or what the structure was for, that you were kind of either succeeding at the game or you weren't. And I always was very just like disinterested in that game. And I did just enough to not fail at things and not enough to like flourish or be exceptional. And so because of that, I think that by and large, with some exceptions, my teachers were like, "Oh, he's just, like an average kid." And I really feel like everyone has something special to give in the same way that you said it. And so I feel like what I had that was special was not really recognized, or even more importantly, like nourished through my education. And um, I had to do a lot of that work on my own to nourish it and discover it in my 20s. And um, a big part of that was, yeah, I think as soon as I had agency over my own life, like choosing where to go to school, that was really the first big choice, where to go to college. But onwards after that, I just increasingly departed from whatever the script was. It's like I've never held a real job for more than a few months, and it's always been like, basically I haven't had a real job effectively, a real job, whatever that is. And I was never interested in buying a house. Currently, I don't want kids. Um, I'm basically homeless, so I travel from place to place and stay with people in their couches and guest rooms. And um, yeah, a big part of it was going to St. John's College for my undergrad, which is a liberal arts school. That's a great book school, and that was incredible for me because I love to read and have conversations and ask questions. And that was probably the happiest period of my life, or one of the happiest periods of my life. And then I started meditating there and went to a monastery, and I trained at a monastery in my 20s. And that was all. My parents were like, "What are you doing?" Especially my mom. And but that's what I did. And the particular monastery that I went to was also very unusual. It was like not a traditional monastery. It was like a new American one, and that's how I met Danielle actually. And because we got connected in San Francisco, and I think either 2018 or the spring of 2019. So I've known her for quite a while. And yeah, eventually also had kind of a period of, there were multiple of these periods I related to this, of what you said, of like 16 and 18, like kind of the frame that you were in just not working anymore. And that happened to me at the monastery, where I was like, I don't even know how I fit in here anymore. And so I had to leave. And since then, my life has kind of exploded, and in a good way. And uh, yeah, I've taken my own very, very strange path that I've not seen anyone do quite the way that I'm doing it. And I love that for me, because I live a very happy life that draws on all the skills I've found within myself and the different capacities that I have. And I get to make my own job and choose my own work and choose where I am and who I work with and how. And um, I love the things that I'm doing. And I love that I get to talk to people like you for 2.5 hours if I want to, and you know, all the different things that I do. So Yeah, that's a lot what resonated. And I'll also say that a big part of my own life's work is what I call empowerment, which is believing in something like what you call a mission, or I like to use the word vow. That was the word that I was taught at the monastery. And I have this, let me see if I can show you, but I have tattoos for each part of my life work. And this is a wand that to me cast the spell, I believe in you. So you said 15, 17 fun believed in me first. Danielle believed in you. Like I've received that spell from people, including Danielle. And so this is for me to also believe in people and support them. First and foremost, to really believe that everyone has something like this, a mission or a vow or whatever you want to call it, and then look for it and help people to find it and do practical things to help them in it and support them where I can, even really small things like you were talking about, things that really can have a big consequence, they add up. So I also resonated. I was just loving hearing you talk about a mission and yeah, grateful to hear how you frame it and how you're connected to that.
Wow. I love the tattoos. I have many tattoos that are tied to stories of my journey. And yeah, I love the concept of tattoos as kind of the way I understood it is, I guess, um, reminders of the tools or what you bring to the world and want to share with others. It's very powerful. I love this one.
Hmm, thank you. I thought you would like it. Hmm. And I hope it goes without saying, but I believe in you. So
Mm,
hmm,
thank you.
I
I
see
believe
that
in
light in you.
you.
Hmm.
Mm.
Well, I know you have something to get to after this, so maybe this would be a good time to close. But thank you so much for joining with me, and I'm wishing you the absolute best with Nautilus, and I look forward to hearing how it goes for you.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to see where you're headed next and hear from the wonderful guests that you have over this podcast, as well as the thoughtful questions that you bring to the conversation. It was wonderful to be chatting with you today,
Hmm.
and I felt very grounded and good.
So glad to hear that, friend. It's a real pleasure and privilege. So thank you.
Thank you.